For everyone that's not been here before, welcome to Spark Northeast. This is the third edition, and I'm not sure if you've seen it earlier, but the meetup group actually reached 100 members. So we hit a big milestone. It's thanks to all you guys. So yeah, thank you very much for joining and giving up your time on a Wednesday night. We've got Charlotte with us today from Cameo Digital, and I've known Charlotte for 5-6 years now, and she was one of my bosses way back when I first got into digital marketing. So we go way back. Charlotte's great. They run a very good digital agency. It's very boutique. There's no account managers, and you deal one-on-one with them. And Charlotte's got lots of experience in the industry, so it should be a great talk tonight. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, while Charlotte's on, feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat or any comments that you'd like. And then when we get to the end, we'll go through those questions and try and get some answers for you. One last thing, yeah, so we'll do some networking after the talk. About 5 o'clock we'll kick off, and there'll be 2 rounds of networking. So we'll split up into rooms of 5 people each. And then after 15 minutes, we'll do an old switcheroo. So you get to meet some other people. When we're in the breakout rooms, feel free at the start to go through each person and just give a 30-second rundown of who you are, what you do, and anything you're looking to get out of the meetup. But yeah, thank you very much. I'll pass over to Charlotte Mcmurray.
Thank you very much, Scott. And thank you everybody for taking the time to drop in today. It's really lovely to see some familiar names and faces and a few new ones as well. So I'll hope to catch up with you later on in the networking. I am going to try and share my screen. So Scott, if you could let me know if this has worked. It worked in our little tech rundown. Are we there?
Yeah, we're all good, yeah.
Wonderful, fantastic. So as a very quick introduction then, Scott's set me up wonderfully. He's been very flattering. I'm Charlotte Mcmurray. I'm from Cameo Digital. We're based in South Tyneside. We are a tiny little boutique consultancy, and essentially our job is to help stressed out marketing managers take control of their digital strategy. We do a lot of kind of overall multi-channel strategy. We do a lot of SEO. We do a lot of copywriting, a lot of persona work, a lot of kind of trying to make the digital marketing data side of things blend well with the fluffier, more strategic, more persona-based side of things as well, because we feel really strongly that both of these are important. That's kind of what's prompted the topic that I want to talk to you about today, which is humanizing digital marketing. So a little bit about why we chose that. Why is that not changing? There it goes, yay. Fantastic, and we're off. So, I mean, it's fair to say that I think the past year, not to labour the point, has been a really challenging one for everybody, I think, on a personal level, but particularly on a professional level as well. Even if you're in an industry that has continued trading, and even if it's been business as usual, it's been absolutely undeniably tough for everybody out there. That's whether you're making changes to the way you work because you have to have a team working remotely, whether you've had to completely reinvent your business model to trade more online if you were a business that had a split kind of focus and you didn't do a lot of digital, or people, even if you are digitally focused but you've been affected by just general lack of consumer confidence, having to step up activity, do a lot more with a lot less, just even to try and keep afloat and stay in business. And I think one of the things that's really come out as a positive actually of 2020, which is, that there aren't very many of them, is that technology has been a huge part of how we've dealt with this crisis. I mean, it's the only reason we can do this now legally, but it does feel impersonal. And I think everybody is getting to the point now where we're hitting that year mark of doing this all over Zoom, where everything is feeling a little bit distant. Everybody is feeling a little bit isolated. And more, I think people are trying new things to start to bridge the gap. So that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. How do we start to make marketing a little bit more human? How do we start to make that digital world that we're all spending an awful lot more time in more human, more empathetic, and connect with customers in a way that, well, not exactly the same as what we're all hoping we'll be going back to in June, at least has a little bit more of that feel. So, I mean, I think we all know, like, I don't want to start with a definition. I think we all know what good human authentic marketing is when we see it. If you're, you know, professional in this space, you get it. Even if you're not, if you're just a consumer, I think people know when they're being talked to on an authentic level and they feel it without really needing to define it. I think the really, really difficult thing when I've been, you know, I came up with this title before I came up with the content, and actually one of the hardest things to define is, you know, what actually is human marketing? How do you start to pin this down? And when you start to, actually, it's a little bit of a slippery concept. And the second you do start to kind of pin it down and track it down, it changes and it shifts. So I want to talk through a few kind of top level areas that I think are the ones that most people associate with humanizing digital marketing. I want to give a few opinions and get on my soapbox a little bit. I'd love to get some opinions from all of you guys as well and turn this into a little bit of a conversation as well. Throw a few examples out there and hopefully just give you a bit to think about in terms of ways of working with these different elements of technology that can help to make more of a personal experience in digital marketing. So first one on the list. Tone of voice is probably the most obvious, and it's probably the one I think people go to first when we talk about humanizing a brand. And I think actually it's one of those things where as marketers we can do ourselves a great disservice when we assume that there's this weird kind of this stereotype that's built up over the past decade or so that being human as a brand means being bright and chirpy and bouncy and irreverent, and having Twitter pun wars and using weird words and, you know, using memes and being on top of TikTok and all of this sort of thing and being this kind of this big informal personality as a brand. And I think actually one of the things that COVID has brought back home here is that doesn't have to be the case. You know, human interaction doesn't have to be a fun one, doesn't have to be a chirpy, cheerful one. It can be extremely serious and extremely down to earth and still be empathetic and important and valuable. I think if we looked at where this has come from, actually these guys have got an awful lot to answer for. Innocent Drinks, when they first came out with their kind of tone of voice and their approach to media, to social, to wording, to how they, you know, created their bottle labels even, and the words they used on there were pretty revolutionary. And it really, really worked. But in a way, they've got a lot to answer for because everybody's copied them. You know, it got to the point where actually you couldn't move for people trying to be innocent and trying to sound like that. And there's almost an expectation that either you're quite a staged, you know, standard corporate brand, or you're doing this very almost cartoonish now, over-egged tone of voice that's just a little bit too informal. I mean, that's done. And I think, honestly, I'm going to go a step further and say that the next one on the list at the moment, and the one that's really starting to annoy me in social advertising and in what I'm seeing in digital marketing right now, is the authentic brands that are reinventing things in an artisanal way. And that's almost the follow-up to this, you know, to the innocent tone of voice, is actually the people who are extremely earnest and extremely artisanal, extremely boutique and extremely serious. I realise I'm probably telling on myself a little bit because that's quite a lot of what Cameo has done as well. And I think, again, it's one of those things that's it's a phase, it's been a bit of a trend and it's moving out now. I don't want to sit here and say that a particular tone of voice is a problem and is the reason we're struggling here. It's not true. And I think, you know, that the biggest point to get across here is actually that tone of voice isn't the be all and end all here, but that actually what it's about is understanding whether something's just a trend and whether you're doing it because everybody else is doing it, or whether it's authentic and it actually matches your brand, it actually matches your knowledge of your audience, and that you're looking at those circumstances and you've developed that tone of voice to fulfill a particular need within your digital strategy. A couple of more modern examples of this, actually. On the serious side, I absolutely loved the way Burger King have handled their social media through COVID. You know, I mean, nobody, I think, would ever have expected that a brand of that size with that level of influence would have told people not to buy from them. And it's a really, really great example of subverting that expectation and handling that in a really quite, you know, mature, considered way, and in a way that I don't think anybody else had dreamed of doing at the time. I was actually really pleased when I'd been preparing this, and I had a whole bit about now in the presentation where I was talking about how wonderful it is that COVID had got rid of that need for brands to be really spontaneous and chirpy and Twitter pun wars, and then actually it was acceptable now to talk about serious things in a way that actually mattered. And I was talking about what a brilliant thing that was, and then fucking Weetabix came along, right? And I had to go back and rewrite this whole section. So this is all new. But actually, you know what, coming back to this, and it completely undermined my entire high horse presentations minute here on serious brands and how we all had to be serious now because of COVID. I think actually Weetabix is a really good example of the fact that we shouldn't be just choosing a tone for the time. We should be choosing based on the circumstances, because I think actually the nice thing about that social post is people have done these Twitter pun wars before. They've done these situations where they post and a load of other brands pile on and get involved. But nobody had done it for a while, and I think everybody felt like they were a little bit scared to, and everybody was trying to be a little bit more grown up. And actually somebody needed to break the ice there. And I think Weetabix did that in a really nice way. I think if we're going to connect those two, if we're going to connect Burger King and Weetabix, what's behind that is that actually there's a marketer there who's really thinking, who has the freedom to make those sorts of decisions, who has the freedom to take risks and do something that's not been done before. And that to me is the human element of tone of voice. It's not necessarily just being chirpy and cheerful. It's not necessarily being serious and earnest and mature and respectful. It can be either of those two or anything in between, but what's important is the thought pattern that goes behind it. So moving on from that, from the tone of voice, let's get into something that is a little bit more of a technological side. And actually this is a really kind of relevant one, is it artificial intelligence is something we've seen a lot of recently. AI and chatbots are really, really big news in so many industries right now. Previous to COVID, because there was a huge potential to reduce customer service costs by automating some of those reactions. Now actually out of necessity, because COVID makes it really, really difficult to man a call center to the same level that previously you would have done. Even if you have a remote team, it can be harder to get those to maintain those same levels of service. A lot of customer service teams, if the clients we're speaking to, are under pressure at the moment, and chatbots are seen as a way of trying to get out of that situation and to manage those customer service inquiries more effectively. So, I mean, in terms of artificial intelligence, it's one of those ones that you can argue either way. I think you can argue that chatbots make customer experiences more human. And I think a lot of people do. And I think a lot of people maybe overestimate the capacity of a chatbot to replace a human interaction. I think on the other side, you've got the people who are maybe a little bit technophobic, who are saying, well, I don't want to talk to a robot. I want to talk to a human being. Why is this being used to gatekeep me? Why am I being held back from talking to a real customer service team, and I have to talk to this robot instead? I've done a little bit of research to this myself and a bit of reading, and I found some really nice data from a company called Userlike, who do bits and pieces of chatbot software and bits and pieces of live chat software as well. And they did a survey. It wasn't a huge one. I think it was about 400 or 500 respondents, something like that, but asking about what people liked about chatbots, how consumers interacted with them, what they didn't like. And actually what you see here is that they understand the benefits. Consumers generally are not 100% averse to using chatbots. We know that as, in general, but typically they understand that it's about getting an answer quickly. It's about, being able to get through to a human if necessary, but, if it's a quick answer, you can get that straight away. Being able to get help outside of normal service hours, they like all of that stuff. The side where they don't like it as much, and the things where there's skepticism there, is exactly what I've just mentioned. The idea that actually these chatbots and these robots might be used to distance somebody from reaching a real human being. Or actually the really interesting point here, the thing that they say that companies should get right, is that it should always let you know that it is a robot. The idea that actually companies might be using this to pull the wool over people's eyes and pretend that they're getting a human interaction when they're not. And the anxiety around that is one of the key areas actually that I think is leading skepticism for chatbots with consumers, and actually one of the key areas where I think brands tend to get this sort of thing wrong. And I think when we're talking about chatbots as a way of making digital marketing humanized, we have to understand exactly what it is we're trying to do here and what purpose they're trying to solve. What I would say is actually that they're not necessarily a replacement for human interactions, but the real human value you're trying to get out of this is solving a problem in a simple way, making them feel like they're in control, demonstrating the empathy, that in terms of this user has a problem, we're able to solve that in a useful way. Areas where chatbots tend to fail. The ones I don't like, and I'm going to pull through a few real examples here, is typically where they're used as a gimmick, where they're used as a layer over something that could be achieved more easily in another way, or when actually they're just pushed way beyond their capabilities. So good example, and I posted about this on LinkedIn earlier in the week, actually, because I got myself a bit sort of het up about it. Months in lockdown have meant I've been quite a fervent customer of Domino's, and I've been ordering from them fairly regularly. And it really did get to the point where actually I was starting, the order tracker on Domino's, if you've not used it, I'm not sure there's anybody who won't have by this point, it's really, really good. Once you've ordered, you get taken to this little order bot. I think it has a name, but I forget its name, and it tells you where things are, and it gives you a live map when your order goes out, so you can see where the delivery driver is. The bugbear with it, though, is that they present it as a robot and as this chatbot, and you've got a bit of a 10-second spiel every time you want to check the status of your order, where it tells you a little joke and it makes a little face and it does a little dance. And do we really need this? Can we not just show me where the pizza is? Can you not just, accept that actually my need at that point is just to know if you've dispatched the thing yet, and I need to be watching the door or not? I think this is one of the places where chatbots fail, actually, is people try to over-humanize them. They try and, make it into a bit more of a song and dance than it needs to be, when actually I think more consumers than not at the moment see them as a solution to a problem. Next one is the example of using a chatbot actually when self-service is easier, or whether there are better ways of doing this. So this is my own app. This is a screenshot from my phone for my O2 Pay Monthly SIM. You'll see when you load up the app, actually you get a really nice little dashboard, nicely planned, shows me my allowance, shows me what I've got left, shows me my next billing date. Alternatively, I can click on the Aura link in the bottom there, and it will let me ask it for exactly the same information. So I have to go to the chatbot for the human interaction, and I can, voice chat with it, or I can type it in. And actually what it brings back is exactly the same information that's in the app. And I spent some time playing with this, and there's absolutely nothing I can get out of that chatbot that isn't already on this screen. And again, it just comes to me in the terms of that's not a human interaction, is it? It's a gimmick. It's a sideshow. It's, there's nothing human about me having to, grant microphone privileges on my phone and speak very clearly into my phone to get information that actually was already on the screen before I clicked into it. Sometimes that sort of interaction just isn't necessary. And I think the point I'm trying to get across with this actually is that, that reinventing the wheel in that way isn't making anybody's experience better. It's not making anybody feel better about a brand, and it's not making life particularly easier for anybody. And if we're talking about, human as being empathetic, as being responsive, as anticipating a user need, putting an extra step like that in the way is just not the way to do it. Final point on this side of things, on the chatbot side, and then we'll move on, is the key fault when we were looking at that data from user like earlier on. The key problem that people had was when they just didn't work. And I think this is a symptom of overworked marketing and customer service departments at the moment, if I'm honest, that we're trying to push these systems to do things that at the moment they're just not capable of. And in terms of the technology, they're just not capable of doing it. This post went huge on Reddit, and this is Millet's kind of chatbot customer service agent, Becky, who is clearly not great. And it's easy to make fun of these things when they fail, and you're always going to get these sorts of stories. But actually, that it does beg the question for me of, how is this chatbot being presented to users? And if this is what you've got to do to get through to a human agent, and you've got to get through that level of failure, I mean, how many sorry I don't understands are they going to allow before they actually pass somebody on to a human agent? So again, I think the human side of this is, yes, actually, consumers and customers will understand that there is a purpose for having a chatbot and that there's a reason for having that interaction. But if it doesn't work and it's stressful, it's not making anybody's lives any easier. It's not making anybody's interaction with a brand more personal. And actually, if there's a self-service platform that does that as well, or if they've just got to wait in a call center queue for a little while, it's way better to be upfront with that than to have them spend 10 minutes on something like this just for the sake of an appearance of trying to be more human. Now I've bashed chatbots for 10 minutes. Let's talk quickly about what they're good at. There are some, there's some really good features here. And I think actually, when you look at what the really big brands do, when you look at what people like Google are doing with chatbots and with assistants at the moment, they're using it as basically a glorified search engine. Essentially what they're for is retrieving information at this point, simple automated Q&A. There's not a lot technologically at the moment that can be done beyond that without some really pretty serious back-end integration where you're using it as an interface to make changes. So really, I mean, fundamentally, I think for the sort of technology that most brands would be able to invest in, you're talking about a search function, you're talking about order tracking, product features, really simple questions, things where people are asking a simple question, expecting a simple response. That's perfect for chatbot technology for me. Similarly, gathering information for a human operator, making that, that qualification, that screening process quicker for somebody who's actually going to pick up the conversation. To me, actually, that is a perfect use for a chatbot in terms of getting better customer service full stop, and making that interaction when they do actually get somebody on the phone feel that much more fluid and that much more seamless. Last one on the list is actually an important one, and I didn't want to leave this presentation without mentioning it, is that chatbots are good for accessibility as well for people. I do a lot of work with some clients in social housing, and they're looking into chatbots as a way of actually ensuring inclusion and accessibility for people who might not be able to use a keyboard, might not be able to use a complex web interface to get their questions solved. I think the main point here, though, is actually that chatbots aren't useful at humanizing digital experiences because they pretend to be human beings. They're useful for humanizing digital experiences because they make them that much smoother and more seamless and easier to deal with. And I think that would be the distinction I would draw. Next topic, so final topic of my three. This one's going to be controversial. So I think a lot of people and a lot of marketers and a lot of digital people automatically associate humanizing a digital experience with personalizing that. I'm going to put forward an argument, and I'm probably expecting to be shot down by a couple of people in this room later on, that that's not actually true. Actually, personalization is not the same as making an experience more human. First point to bring up with this, and the first argument I would raise on that topic, is that actually, when we're not going to have this data, people don't want you using their personal data. They don't like being personalized to, if that makes sense. People are increasingly concerned about the use of their data, about trusting companies with that information. I'm sure you'll have seen this on LinkedIn at the moment. People are actively trying to undermine attempts to personalize communications to them on LinkedIn, where it's automated and where they feel that it's inauthentic. They don't want you dropping their name in as a variable. They're actively trying to insert an emoji there so that they can tell when somebody's actually trying to talk to them or not. Even Facebook admits that sometimes its ads can get a little bit too personal, and it takes that as feedback on those posts. So I think, how do we deliver a human experience without personalizing it? And it does sound like a contradiction in terms, but I think actually when you look at what consumers want, it's what a lot of users are asking us to do. They want they want an amazing experience, but they also want data privacy. So I think there's, it's not necessarily the catch-22 it needs to be. I think the reason for that actually is that when we look at the big brands, so if you look at the Teslas of data, you look at the huge, the Googles, the Facebooks, people like that, the amount of data they have to create those personalized experiences is absolutely off the charts compared to anything that we as sort of lowly, brand marketers could possibly expect to have available to us. They don't need to ever worry about not having that information. They can, it's so powerful. They can figure out what customers want, serve it back to them in a way that's so subtle they don't even really know that it's happening. The challenge that we have here, and the second reason I think we need to be really, really careful about over relying on data, is that if Google and Facebook are driving around in Teslas like this, most marketers' use of availability of data to power this sort of stuff is something like this. We're chugging along compared to the giants. We have absolutely nothing. And I think for us to aspire to that level of personalization and that level of data-driven marketing is actually just completely unrealistic for the vast majority of brands. Case in point, quick bugbear. I work a lot with B2B brands in really specific niches. And I'm not going to get too much into paid search terminology, but you're talking about some really, really small niches where actually there's just not that much search volume. There's not many people searching those keywords. If you want to sponsor those keywords, if you want to sponsor keywords relating to a really specific B2B niche, Google will push you so hard to create dynamic ads where you create a ton of variations and it tests them for you and it finds the perfect combination of different headlines. Now, for most of my clients, for the budgets they've got, for the level of search volume that's available, they would have to be running those ads for about 50 years before they got enough data to actually get the best performing variant of those ads. Or they could just hire a copywriter. And this is where I think it starts to become a bit of a bugbear for me. Quite often I think people are seduced by the sexy data tools, by the idea of machine learning, by the idea of being able to do all of this stuff automatically, where actually the vast majority of brands will just never have the capacity to make that happen and to really allow that to become a reality. And again, going back to the human side of this, actually, it's far more efficient at this point for the vast majority of brands to be looking at this from a human angle, to be looking at good copywriting, good strategy, good persona work, good understanding of audiences, because to get that same level of insight out of data, I think is just completely unachievable for most brands. So, and I think this is kind of tying back to the thread that I'm drawing through all three of these different points, is that I don't think that humanizing digital marketing is down to a specific approach or a specific tone of voice or a specific technology. I think it's down to making sure that actually the human beings in the background are doing the best work that they can and that the technology is serving them and not the other way around. It's getting more people into marketing, it's getting more humans making decisions, and it's getting them into a position where actually they're capable of impacting those outcomes, because there's just nothing we have out there at the moment for most brands, unless you are so huge it's not even funny, that will have that same impact as just having that strategic time, that preparation, that thinking time to make sure that the work you're doing is actually really good. How? It comes down to me to treating people well. It comes down to marketers being treated well. And one of the things we're seeing, and I wrote a blog post about a few weeks ago, is that actually with COVID and the stress and the level of pressure that a lot of brands are under, a lot of marketing teams are suffering because they're being asked to achieve so much with so little. And I think carving out that time for research, for strategy, for thinking, for figuring stuff out, for quality over quantity is something that's really, really important and is actually probably being overlooked by a lot of companies, not necessarily for bad reasons, but just out of desperation, because the times are tough at the moment. We need to get results. I think actually taking that step back and that breather and that refocus on strategy is probably the number one way you can get better results and more human approach and better engagement over the long term. On the technical side of things, I think the other side is we need to be really, really careful about how we invest in technology, about how much we do process things out, about how much we rely on technology to do things for us when we don't have that magical level of data where statistically it's going to work for us. Back in the old days when I used to work with Scott, actually we talked a lot about analytics budgets and the idea that if you're investing in a tool, it should be 10% of your budget and the other 90% of your budget should be on people to run that tool. I think these days, obviously, it's changed a lot. There's a lot more out there and there's a lot more technology which works a lot more efficiently than it used to. So I wouldn't stick to that exact percentage. But I think that there is, there's always got to be a balance here. And I think if people are investing in technology to try and make things more human, rather than investing in the people to run that technology, then there's a bit of a contradiction in terms there that we probably need to really start thinking about. I mean, the real human touches right now, as I say, can only really come from human beings. They are the most expensive resource they have. They're the most advanced technology we have. And at the moment, that's a lot of what we're talking about at Cameo is that idea of actually putting the marketing managers and the marketing brains in charge and putting them in front of the tools, not having them working to serve the tools. And that's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to hand back to Scott now, unless there are any questions. Was there anything that came out in the chat, Scott? I've not got that here.
There's nothing that's came up in the chat, but I could waffle a little bit here, and then maybe if anyone wants to drop a question in the chat, we'll get to it. But yeah, thank you very much, Charlotte. That was great. I enjoyed how probably 50% of your examples were food related.
Can you tell what I've been doing this year?
Yeah. Oh God, see that little robot from Domino's. Never have I been more stressed about a bot in my entire life.
He's rotten, isn't he? He likes to keep you hanging. It's like you just a little drum roll and you're just like, where's my food?
I know, yeah. It's crazy. Fun. Yeah, I love them. But yeah, Weetabix and the Weetabix beans thing was huge. I seen also that Marmite tried to jump on that bandwagon as well the week afterwards. Yeah, they had a big billboard, and then the top of the Marmite was in a car windscreen, like in real life. So yeah, there was a lot of that going about after the Weetabix Marmite thing. But
again, there's people jumping on the bandwagon, but that's not helpful. It's being the first one to do it. I'm surprised actually, because that's always been Marmite's sort of area, hasn't it? They've always owned that space of food most people think is horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I think Autoglass got in on the action as well by like rolling up to the Marmite sign. But yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I love the part about the personalization. So like lots of people in businesses I talk to are always like super excited about personalization. They're like, how can we get to personalization? How can we do one-to-one marketing? But the data is just not there. Like I've worked with 5100 companies that don't have the data for this kind of level of personalization, and all these sexy Google ad dynamic remarketing programmatic things. So I think you're 100% right. Yeah, it's hiring a good copywriter and invest in the people before the tools. Tools are not going to fix anything. It's the person there that's going to be the executor. So yeah.
I don't know about you, Scott, but it's so unsexy when you have those conversations. People get really excited and they think you're going to come in with some amazing, technological tool that's going to change their life. And you're like, nah, you just need a decent copywriter and a proper strategy. And they are a little. You see them sort of deflate a little bit, and it's not an easy conversation to have.
Yeah. It breaks my heart because I am one of those people that like shiny new things.
I love the idea of it, but then you actually get to use them in practice, and you just you see it fall flat, and it's no fun.
We've got a question, from Richard Dennis. So, what kind of steps should people take to find their brand tone and voice, or is it something that they should discover along the way?
Definitely an element of discovering along the way. I am a massive proponent of persona marketing, of understanding the audience that you're dealing with, the situation that they're in, the questions and the fears and the interests and the things that get them excited. And I think actually really, really understanding those personas is the key to getting that brand tone of voice right. I think the other point I'd say is you don't need to have one brand tone of voice. You can have a different one for social than you have for email, than you have for your website, than you have for your formal proposal documentation, and that's absolutely fine. I think what really is tying those all together, though, is, are those an actual authentic expression of your branding? We put a blog post on the website, the Cameo website, a few months back, actually, that Lauren Archer wrote about authenticity and brand. I think for me, that does trump brand tone of voice. Tone of voice can be flexible and it can be quite, it can shift depending on the circumstance. And I think actually it's been quite interesting to see a lot of brands reinvent their tone of voice a little bit through COVID. Actually, nobody talks the same way to absolutely everybody, even as a human being. So I think it's more about understanding the people you're talking to and thinking, actually, okay, so for this specific circumstance, what does it need to be? What does it need to be to get the message across that we need to get?
Yeah. It's like my mother, when I've done something bad, talks to me much differently to the outside world. So I think that's a good example. But cool. Yeah, what we'll do now then is we'll split out into breakout rooms. We'll do roughly 5-ish per each room or close to that number. And then, spend like 20, 30 seconds introducing yourself, what you do, and then, get a bit of networking done. I think we all desperately need it. Unfortunately, it's on Zoom and not with drinks or libations. So, well, maybe you've got some personal ones at home. But yeah, cool. Claire, could you do the honors and fire us into breakout rooms, please?